The Black Hawk descended through the Afghan dust like a hawk dropping toward prey, rotors churning the air into a brown tempest that stung exposed skin and got into everything: eyes, mouth, equipment. Staff Sergeant Maya Torres sat in the cargo bay, one hand steadying the rifle case beside her, the other gripping the nylon webbing as the helicopter banked hard for final approach to forward operating base Sentinel. She'd seen 100 FOBs just like this one: HESCO barriers and concertina wire, guard towers with bored sentries, the permanent haze of dust that never quite settled. Home for the next 6 months, assuming she lived that long. The odds were better than most realized, especially with what she carried in that battered case. The skids touched down with a jolt. Torres grabbed her gear and stepped out into the rotor wash, squinting against the particle storm. A reception committee waited at the edge of the landing zone, 5 soldiers in full kit, watching the new arrival with the casual arrogance of men who'd been in country long enough to think they knew everything. Sergeant First Class Derek Hammond stood at the center, arms crossed, aviator sunglasses reflecting the Chinook's dying rotors. He was textbook military, square jaw, recruitment poster posture, the kind of operator who'd probably been prom king before he learned to kill people. His team flanked him like a pack that had already established its hierarchy. Torres slung her pack and reached for her rifle case. The moment she pulled it out, she heard it, that barely suppressed snicker. The case was old, the green canvas faded nearly white in spots, held together with parachute cord and what looked like 100-mile-an-hour tape. It had character, which in military terms meant it looked like garbage. "Jesus Christ," Hammond said loud enough to carry over the diminishing rotor noise. "They're sending us Grandma's Antique Roadshow." His spotter, a lean specialist named Jenkins with a face full of acne scars, laughed on cue. "Gonna need a museum curator, not an armorer." Torres walked toward them, her boots crunching on the gravel and sand mix that covered everything. She was smaller than most of them, 5'6", maybe 140 pounds soaking wet, with hair pulled back severe enough to give lesser women headaches. Her face was weathered, lined around the eyes in a way that came from squinting through scopes in a dozen different deserts and mountains. She looked tired. She looked old by operator standards. She looked exactly like someone Hammond's team would underestimate. "Staff Sergeant Maya Torres," she said flatly, extending no hand, offering no smile. "Reporting as ordered." Hammond looked her up and down like he was inspecting equipment at a yard sale. "Derek Hammond, team leader. This is Jenkins, Martinez, Cooper, and Singh. We're the primary sniper element for this sector." He gestured to the weapons they carried, sleek M110 semi-automatic sniper systems with advanced optics, suppressed barrels, and enough tactical accessories to make a civilian gun enthusiast weep with envy. Everything was new, clean, expensive. "Nice to meet you," Torres said without inflection. "That your primary weapon?" Hammond nodded toward her case. "It is." "What ray you running? M110, M2010. Torres set the case down and unzipped it with the care of someone handling something religious. Inside, nestled in foam that had conformed to its exact shape over years of use, lay an M40A3 sniper rifle that looked like it had survived a war museum fire. The finish was worn completely off in places, revealing bare metal underneath. The stock was scratched and gouged, the original dark color faded to a mottled gray-brown. The scope was an older model, the lens housing scratched but the glass itself pristine. Parachute cord wrapped the stock at 2 points where the original material had cracked. It looked like something that should have been decommissioned a decade ago. The silence lasted exactly 3 seconds before Hammond's entire team burst into laughter. "Holy shit," Martinez said, a stocky guy with a thick Boston accent. "Is that thing Vietnam era?" "Older than my dad's truck," Cooper added. Singh, the youngest at maybe 23, couldn't help himself. "Does it fire musket balls?" Hammond pulled off his sunglasses, revealing eyes the color of winter sky. He wasn't laughing. He was studying Tors like she was a problem he needed to solve. "Staff Sergeant, with all due respect, what the hell are you doing with that relic? We've got modern weapons systems. There's an entire armory full of current generation platforms." Tors lifted the rifle from its case with both hands, her movements precise and practiced. She checked the chamber empty, as expected, then shouldered the weapon, settling it against her body like it was an extension of her skeleton. The fit was perfect, worn in by repetition that had nothing to do with luck and everything to do with thousands of hours of muscle memory. "This rifle," she said quietly, her voice cutting through their amusement like a knife through silk, "has 237 confirmed kills across 5 deployments. Ramadi, Fallujah, Helmand Province, Kandahar, and Kunar. It's killed insurgents, Taliban commanders, al-Qaeda financiers, and one particularly unfortunate drug lord who made the mistake of targeting American patrols." She met Hammond's eyes with a gaze that had seen things his nightmares couldn't imagine. "It's never jammed, never failed, never missed when I needed it most. I've rebuilt it twice, new barrel, new trigger assembly, but the action, the heart of this weapon is original. It knows me. I know it. We've kept each other alive through 17 firefights and more near misses than I care to count." Tors lowered the rifle, her thumb unconsciously running along a deep gouge in the stock, a scar with its own story. "So you can laugh all you want, Sergeant Hammond. You can mock it, dismiss it, underestimate it." She placed the rifle carefully back in its case. "But this relic has more combat experience than your entire team combined. And before this deployment is over, you're going to be very glad it's here." Hammond's smile had faltered but not disappeared. He exchanged glances with his team, looks that said they'd humor the crazy lady with her antique. "Range time doesn't count, sweetheart," he said, the condescension thick enough to cut. "Wait till you're in the shit with bullets flying both ways. That's when fancy stories don't mean squat." Tors shouldered her pack, lifted her rifle case, and started toward the barracks someone had pointed out earlier. "You're right, Hammond," she called back without turning. "Stories don't mean squat. Results do. And in about 48 hours, when we get the mission brief I know is coming, you'll see exactly what kind of results this old rifle produces." She disappeared into the maze of containerized housing units, leaving Hammond's team in uncertain silence. Jenkins finally spoke. "What mission brief?" Hammond frowned, looking toward the operations center. "No idea. Command hasn't briefed us on anything new." But deep in his gut, in that place where soldiers learn to trust their instincts, Derek Hammond felt the first cold finger of doubt. The way Tors had said it, not as a guess, but as certainty, suggested she knew something they didn't. Inside her assigned quarters, Tors set down her gear and began the ritual she'd performed in 100 temporary homes. She unpacked her rifle, assembled her cleaning kit, and began the meditative process of caring for the weapon that had become more reliable than most people in her life. Outside, the Afghan sun beat down on Fob Sentinel with merciless intensity. The mockery had begun. But so had the countdown to the moment when laughter would turn to silence, and an old rifle would remind a new generation why some weapons become legends. The Afghan sun hadn't yet reached its full brutal intensity when Hammond decided to make his point. He'd spent half the night thinking about Tors and that museum piece she called a weapon, and it gnawed at him like a stone in his boot. His team was elite, hand-picked, extensively trained, equipped with the finest technology American tax dollars could buy. And now they had dead weight in the form of a woman clinging to a rifle that belonged in a display case. He found her at 600 hours on the makeshift range at the eastern edge of the Fob, already set up and running drills. She was alone, methodical, going through what looked like a pre-mission ritual, checking elevation, reading wind flags, making notes in a worn leather notebook that looked as ancient as her rifle. "Morning Tors," Hammond called out, his team filing in behind him. They'd drawn a small crowd, Word had spread about the new sniper with the antique, and soldiers loved watching someone get taken down a peg. Sleep well. Tors didn't look up from her notebook. Well enough. We thought we'd do some friendly qual runs. Let you see how modern equipment performs. Hammond gestured to Martinez, who was already setting up his M110 with its Schmidt and Bender optic that cost more than a used car. Maybe you'll see what you're missing. I know exactly what I'm missing, Tors said, still writing. 3 pounds of unnecessary weight, 2 batteries that'll die at the worst possible moment, and a false sense of security that comes from relying on technology instead of skill. Jenkins snorted. Big talk from someone carrying Grandpa's deer rifle. Tors finally looked up, her eyes flat and unreadable. You want to make this interesting, Hammond? I'm listening. 600 yards, 5 shots. Loser buys the first round when we get back stateside. She paused, and admits their equipment isn't everything they thought it was. The crowd of soldiers that had gathered murmured with interest. Hammond felt the weight of expectations, his team watching, his reputation on the line. The smart play was to walk away, but pride was a powerful drug, especially in front of an audience. You're on, he said, ladies first. Tors walked to the firing line without ceremony. Her rifle looked pathetic next to the modern weapons racked nearby. No sleek lines, no matte black finish, no rails festooned with accessories. Just worn wood and weathered metal and the scars of hard use. She took her position with movements that were almost ritualistic. Prone, body aligned, left hand under the stock in a classic position that military instructors had been teaching since before most of Hammond's team was born. Her right hand found the grip with the familiarity of a handshake exchanged 10,000 times. She settled her cheek against the stock where the wood had worn smooth, her eye finding the scope with muscle memory that bypassed conscious thought. The crowd went quiet. Even mockery had its limits when a weapon was being aimed downrange. Tors didn't rush. She lay there for nearly 30 seconds, just breathing, reading the wind flags, feeling the slight breeze on her face. Hammond noticed her notebook was open beside her, filled with calculations and wind charts that looked like something from an engineering textbook. Finally, she chambered a round. The bolt action made a sound like breaking bones, metallic, mechanical, utterly final. It was a sound that promised consequence. Her first shot cracked across the range with a report that seemed sharper than the suppressed weapons everyone else used. Downrange, 600 yards away, the target showed a hit dead center in the bull's. Lucky, someone muttered. Tors worked the bolt smooth, practiced, the brass casing ejecting in a perfect arc to land in the dirt beside her. She didn't rush, didn't hurry. Another breath, another calculation, another shot. Same hole. The muttering stopped. Third shot. The target monitor showed it had passed through the same ragged opening the first two had created. At 600 yards, she was essentially shooting through the same point of impact over and over. Hammond felt something cold settle in his stomach. Fourth shot. Fifth shot. When the range officer called ceasefire and pulled up the target camera feed on the monitor, it showed a single ragged hole maybe an inch across. 5 rounds stacked so close together they'd essentially created one large wound in the paper. The crowd was dead silent now. Tors stood, ejected the final brass casing, and cleared her weapon with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd done it so many times it was automatic. She turned to Hammond. Your turn, Sergeant. Hammond's mouth was dry. He'd qualified expert on every weapons system the Army had issued him. He'd made shots in combat that other snipers called impossible. He was good. He knew he was good. But what he just witnessed wasn't good. It was something else entirely. He took his position with his M110, feeling the weight of every eye on him. The rifle was comfortable, familiar, loaded with advantages Tors didn't have: semi-automatic operation, advanced optics with ranging capability, even a built-in level to ensure can't-free shooting. He had technology on his side. He focused on the target, let the advanced reticle do its job calculating holdover and windage. The trigger broke clean, one of the advantages of a $4,000 trigger group. The shot felt good. Downrange, the monitor showed his hit 4 inches from center, good by any standard, excellent even. But not what Torres had just done. He fired 4 more shots, working to control his breathing, fighting the awareness that he was being measured against a standard he hadn't anticipated. His group was tight, maybe 3 inches total spread. In any normal qualification, it would be more than respectable. Next to Torres' single ragged hole, it looked amateur. The range officer announced the results with professional neutrality, but the numbers didn't lie. Hammond's group, 3.2 inches. Torres' group, 0.9 inches. Jenkins stepped up next, determined to save face for the team. He was their best shooter after Hammond, the one who'd won the battalion competition 2 months running. His M110 was zeroed perfectly, his dope book immaculate. He shot a 2.8-inch group, better than most, worse than what mattered. Martinez tried, then Cooper, then Singh, each one bringing modern equipment and excellent training to bear, each one shooting groups that would qualify them as expert marksmen by any military standard. None of them came within 2 inches of what Torres had done, with a rifle that looked like it should be in a museum. When the last shooter finished, Torres picked up her rifle case with the same careful deliberation she'd shown since arriving. She looked at Hammond, and for the first time, he saw something in her eyes that might have been pity. "Modern equipment is wonderful, Sergeant Hammond," she said quietly, just loud enough for his team to hear. "It can compensate for a lot of things, wind, range estimation, even minor technique flaws. But it can't compensate for one thing, time. This rifle and I have spent thousands of hours together. We know each other's quirks, tolerances, limits. When I pull this trigger, I know exactly where that bullet will go because I've pulled it under every condition imaginable." She started to walk away, then paused. "Your equipment will fail you eventually. Batteries die, electronics glitch, scopes fog, but skill," she tapped her temple. "Skill lives here and experience lives here." She touched her chest. "Those don't run out of batteries." Hammond watched her go, feeling the weight of his team's silence. They'd come to prove a point, to put the old-timer in her place, to demonstrate the superiority of modern warfare. Instead, they'd been schooled by a woman and a rifle that had probably been considered outdated, when some of them were still in elementary school. "Sergeant," Jenkins ventured carefully, "what do we do?" Hammond stared at the target monitor, still showing that impossibly tight group. "We shut up and learn," he said finally, "because if she can shoot like that on a range—" He trailed off, not wanting to finish the thought. If she could shoot like that on a range, what could she do in actual combat? The crowd dispersed slowly. The entertainment value drained away and replaced with something else. A creeping awareness that maybe, just maybe, they'd badly misjudged the quiet woman with the ancient rifle. In the operations center, Captain Williams reviewed mission folders marked classified, preparing for a briefing scheduled for 1400 hours. The intelligence was fresh, the target high value, the risk extreme. He'd need his best people. He made a note on his roster: Torres M. Primary Overwatch. Something about her personnel file suggested she was exactly what this mission needed. 5 deployments, 17 combat engagements, 237 confirmed kills, 0 mission failures. The numbers spoke louder than any mockery ever could. Outside, Torres sat in her quarters, cleaning her rifle with the devotion of a monk tending a sacred relic. Each component was removed, inspected, cleaned, and replaced with movements so practiced they bordered on meditation. She knew what was coming. She'd seen the pattern before: new fob, high-value target in the region, the specific way commanders looked at her file. A mission was coming, probably within 48 hours. Something difficult. Something that would require precision at extreme range. Something that would make Hammond's team understand why she'd never given up this relic. The rifle gleamed under her careful attention, 13 years of scars and scratches telling stories these young soldiers couldn't imagine. Stories of Fallujah rooftops and Helmand valleys. Stories of shots taken in sandstorms and mountain winds. Stories of men who'd mocked it before learning to respect it. Tors smiled slightly, a predator's expression. The challenge was over. The real test was about to begin. The operations center fell silent at exactly 1400 hours when Captain Robert Williams stepped to the front of the briefing room. The temperature inside was barely tolerable, air conditioning struggling against the Afghan heat. But every soldier present felt a different kind of chill when they saw the expression on Williams's face. This wasn't a routine patrol briefing. This was something else. Hammond's team sat in the front row, still processing their morning humiliation. Tors sat alone in the back corner, notebook open, pen ready, her eyes already fixed on the blank projection screen with an intensity that suggested she knew what was coming. Williams didn't waste time with pleasantries. "Gentlemen, Staff Sergeant Tors, we have a time-sensitive, high-value target situation." He clicked the remote, and the screen blazed to life with a photograph that made several soldiers lean forward involuntarily. The face staring back at them belonged to a man in his mid-40s, heavy beard streaked with gray, eyes like dark stones, a scar running from his left temple to his jawline. He wore traditional Afghan dress, but there was nothing traditional about the cold intelligence in his expression. "Khalid Nasir," Williams said, letting the name hang in the air, "also known as the Butcher of Helmand, Taliban commander, weapons facilitator, and the architect of 17 attacks on coalition forces in the past 8 months alone." He clicked again, and a list of incidents appeared: dates, locations, casualty counts. 47 confirmed American KIAs attributed directly to operations he planned or executed, 3 roadside bombs, 2 suicide attacks, multiple ambushes. He's also responsible for the deaths of approximately 200 Afghan civilians who refused to cooperate with Taliban operations. The room's temperature seemed to drop another 10 degrees. Jenkins spoke up, his voice tight. "Sir, I recognize this guy. He's been on the wanted list for 2 years. Intelligence said he was operating out of Pakistan." "He was," Williams confirmed, "until 72 hours ago." Another click brought up satellite imagery of a remote mountain village, the terrain so rugged it looked like the surface of an alien planet. Signals intelligence intercepted communications indicating Nasir is meeting with weapons suppliers from Chechnya in this village. Grid reference 42 SWD 4782-3391 in approximately 36 hours. The meeting is to finalize a deal for advanced explosives and possibly anti-aircraft missiles. Martinez whistled low, "MANPADs. Potentially. If this deal goes through, every helicopter in theater becomes vulnerable." Williams let that sink in. "Our mission is simple. Observe, confirm identity, and eliminate the target before he can complete this transaction and disappear again. This is a capture-or-kill operation, with extreme prejudice toward the latter." Hammond was already studying the topographical map that had appeared on screen. The village sat in a natural bowl, surrounded by mountains on 3 sides, with only one road in and out, a perfect defensive position. "Sir, what's our insertion plan?" "Black Hawk insert 8 kilometers north at 2100 hours tomorrow. You'll move on foot to observation positions under cover of darkness. Rules of engagement are weapons-free once positive ID is confirmed. Air support will be on standby, but response time is 20 minutes minimum. Those mountains play hell with communications and flight patterns." Williams zoomed in on the terrain map. "Nasir is smart. He chose this location specifically because it's a nightmare for conventional assault. Steep approaches, limited firing positions, multiple escape routes. We get one shot at this, literally and figuratively. If he gets spooked, he'll vanish into Pakistan and we won't see him again for months, if ever. Tors spoke for the first time, her voice cutting through the tactical discussion. "Sir, what's the weather forecast?" Williams looked surprised by the question. "Clear skies, winds 10-15 mph from the southwest, gusting higher at elevation." "Why?" "Just planning, sir." Tors made a note in her book, her pen moving in quick, precise strokes that looked like mathematical equations. Hammond stood, approaching the map with the confidence of someone who'd run 100 similar operations. His finger traced possible positions, his tactical mind already working the problem. "Primary observation post here." He indicated a ridge approximately 800 meters from the target village. "Good sightlines, natural cover, manageable approach. We set up before dawn, wait for positive ID, take the shot." Williams nodded. "Agreed. That's your position, Hammond. You'll have primary responsibility for the kill shot." Hammond's chest swelled slightly. This was it, the mission that would define his deployment, possibly his career. Khalid Nasir was the kind of high-value target that made reputations. "Yes, sir. We won't miss." "You'd better not." Williams's expression was granite. "This bastard has killed too many good soldiers. I want him in a body bag." He looked around the room. "Hammond's team will take primary overwatch. Tors, you'll provide secondary coverage from an alternate position." Tors studied the map with an intensity that made Hammond uncomfortable. Her finger didn't go to the obvious position he'd selected. Instead, she traced a route to a ridge further east, higher up, more exposed. "Sir, requesting permission to take this position." She tapped a spot that made several soldiers wince. The elevation marker read 10,200 feet. The approach looked nearly vertical. "Tors, that's a hell of a climb," Williams said, frowning. "And you'd be at, what, 1,400 meters from target? That's extreme range." 1,430 meters, sir, accounting for the actual approach paths Nasir is likely to use. Tors pulled out her worn notebook, flipping to a page covered in calculations. "But from this position, I have clear line of sight to the entire valley, including dead zones that are invisible from Sergeant Hammond's position. The primary op has excellent coverage of the main village structures, but there are 3 buildings, here, here, and here, that are completely masked by terrain from that angle." She traced the sightlines with her pen, and Hammond felt his confidence waver. He'd missed those blind spots in his initial assessment. "These structures," Tors continued, her finger tapping each location, "are positioned perfectly for use as alternate meeting sites or escape routes. If I were Nasir and I'd survived this long by being paranoid, I wouldn't use the most obvious building for a sensitive meeting. I'd use something tucked away, harder to observe, with multiple exits." Williams leaned closer to the map, his eyes narrowing. "You think the intelligence is wrong about the meeting location?" "I think the intelligence tells us he'll be in this village, sir. But inside that village he has options, and men like Nasir don't live as long as he has by being predictable." Tors met Williams's gaze steadily. "From Hammond's position, if Nasir uses one of these alternate structures, we might not even see him. From my position, I can cover every possible approach and egress point." Hammond felt heat rising in his face. "Captain, with respect to the staff sergeant, 1,400 meters is an extremely difficult shot even under ideal conditions. In mountain winds, with the stress of a time-sensitive target, that's bordering on impossible. My position gives us 800 meters, well within confirmed kill range, with a clear shot at the primary target building intelligence has identified." "Your position gives you 800 meters to one building," Tors said quietly. "Mine gives me 1,400 meters to everywhere that matters." The room went silent. It wasn't quite insubordination, but it was close. A staff sergeant publicly contradicting a sergeant first class's tactical assessment. Williams studied both positions, his jaw working. Finally, Hammond, you take the primary position as planned. Tors, you take the ridge. If Nasir shows up where intelligence says he will, Hammond has the shot. If he shows up anywhere else, he looked at Tors. Can you make a 1,400-meter shot in mountain winds? Tors didn't hesitate. Yes, sir. How can you be so sure? Because I've made that shot before, sir. Helmand Province, 2019. Taliban commander at 1,510 meters in 18 mph crosswinds. She paused. He never heard it coming. Hammond wanted to object, to point out that one lucky shot didn't guarantee success, that her antique rifle couldn't possibly perform at that range with modern weapons reliability. But the memory of that morning's range session stopped the words in his throat. Williams made his decision. Fine, Hammond primary, Tors secondary. You'll insert together and split at the base of the mountains. Hammond, you're weapons free once you have positive ID. Tors, you provide coverage and take the shot only if Hammond can't engage or if targets appear in your sector. He looked at both of them. This is not a competition. This is about killing a terrorist who's murdered 47 Americans. Ego stays here. Clear. Clear, sir, Hammond said stiffly. Crystal, sir, Tors confirmed. Williams pulled up photos of Nasir from different angles, different contexts, some from drone footage, others from informant cameras. Memorize this face. Positive ID is critical. We cannot, I repeat, cannot, have a civilian casualty on this operation. The political blowback would be catastrophic. You are certain of your target before you fire or you don't fire at all. Understood. The room chorused agreement. Insertion is 2,100 hours tomorrow. That gives you 29 hours to prep equipment, study the terrain, and get your heads right. Intelligence updates will be pushed to you as they come in. Questions? Singh raised his hand. Sir, what about exfil if things go sideways? Same route out. If you're compromised, break contact and move to exfil point alpha, 3 clicks north of insertion. We'll have QRF on standby, but gentlemen, if you have to call for help, this mission has already failed. Nasir will rabbit the moment he hears gunfire and we'll have lost our chance. Williams looked at each of them in turn. This is what we do. This is why we're here. 47 American soldiers are dead because of this man. We owe them. We owe their families. And tomorrow night we're going to pay that debt in full. He clicked off the projector. Dismissed. Get your gear squared away. The team filed out, already discussing loadouts and contingencies. Hammond paused at the door, looking back at Tors, who remained seated, still studying her notebook. That's a hell of a climb you picked, he said, trying to sound casual. Tors looked up, her expression unreadable. It's the right position. For a shot you might not even need to take. I hope you're right, Hammond. I genuinely do. She stood, gathering her materials. But if Nasir doesn't cooperate with our intelligence assessment, that hell of a climb becomes the only thing standing between him and another 47 Gold Star families. She walked past him, leaving Hammond alone in the operations center, staring at the topographical map still displayed on the screen. That ridge Tors had chosen looked brutal, near vertical in places, exposed to wind, probably freezing at night at that elevation, and 1,400 meters from target. He thought about that ragged hole she'd punched in the target that morning. 5 shots, 1 hole, like she was operating on a different level than everyone else. Hammond shook his head. Range shooting was one thing, combat was another. When the pressure was on, when bullets were flying both ways, when everything depended on one shot, that's when modern equipment mattered. That's when technology gave you the edge. At least, that's what he told himself. Outside, Tors walked toward the armory, her mind already in mission mode. She'd need to prep her rifle, check every component, verify her cold bore zero, calculate ballistics for the elevation and temperature differential. 1,430 meters at 10,200 feet altitude meant thinner air, which meant different bullet performance. The winds would be tricky, swirling unpredictably in the mountain terrain. But she'd done harder shots. She'd done them with this same rifle. And tomorrow night, if Khalid Nasser made the mistake of showing his face in her kill zone, she'd do it again. The countdown had begun. 36 hours until mission launch. 36 hours until Hammond and his team learned why some soldiers carried old rifles. Because old rifles in the right hands didn't just kill targets. They killed legends. The Black Hawk's rotors beat against the night air like a mechanical heart as it skimmed low over the Afghan mountains, flying nap of the earth to avoid detection. Inside the cargo bay, 6 soldiers sat in darkness broken only by the red glow of interior lights, just enough to preserve night vision, not enough to make them targets. Tors sat near the door, her ancient rifle secured across her chest, hands resting on it like a talisman. She'd been awake for 23 hours straight, running final preparations, memorizing terrain features, calculating wind values at different elevations. Her body screamed for sleep, but her mind was crystal clear, locked into that strange state of hyper-awareness that came before combat. Hammond sat across from her, his team clustered around him. They'd checked their equipment 3 times, thermal optics, range finders, advanced communication systems, backup batteries for everything. They looked ready. They looked professional. They looked like soldiers who'd trained together for months and trusted their gear implicitly. The crew chief held up 5 fingers, 5 minutes to insertion. Tors felt the familiar pre-mission sensation. Not quite fear, not quite excitement, something primal that lived in the space between. She'd felt it 17 times before in combat, and it had kept her alive through situations that should have killed her. The helicopter banked hard, dropping into a valley that wasn't on most maps. The pilot was good, threading the massive aircraft between rock walls with barely meters to spare on either side. Then they were flaring, the skids touching down on a small plateau surrounded by boulders the size of houses. "Go, go, go," the crew chief shouted over the rotor noise. They poured out into the darkness, weapons up, scanning for threats. The Black Hawk lifted off immediately, not wanting to stay grounded a second longer than necessary. The sound of its rotors faded quickly, swallowed by the vastness of the mountains. Silence descended like a physical weight. Hammond pulled out his GPS, confirming their position. 8 clicks to target zone. We move in 2 elements. My team takes the western approach to primary op. Tors, you head east to your ridge. We split here. Tors checked her own GPS, then looked up at the mountain that was her destination. Even with night vision, it looked like something from a nightmare, a near-vertical wall of rock and scree that disappeared into darkness above. Her route would take her up 3,000 feet of elevation gain over approximately 2 kilometers of horizontal distance. Simple math made it brutal, a 75% grade in places. "You sure about this?" Jenkins asked, following her gaze. "That's not a climb, that's a suicide mission." "I'm sure," Tors said simply. She adjusted her pack, redistributing weight. Everything she needed for the next 36 hours was on her back: water, ammunition, minimal rations, cold weather gear. Total weight, 63 pounds plus her rifle. Hammond extended his hand. "Good luck, Tors, see you on the other side." She shook it, surprised by the gesture. "You too, Hammond, stay sharp." Then she was moving, disappearing into the darkness toward the eastern approach, her night vision turning the world into shades of green ghostlight. Hammond watched her go, then turned to his team. "Let's move, we've got our own mountain to climb." But Hammond's route, while difficult, followed established goat trails and natural terrain features. It was hard work, but it was doable. Tors' route was something else entirely. The first hour wasn't terrible, steep hiking through loose rock that slid treacherously underfoot, but manageable. She moved steadily, packing herself, knowing the real challenge lay ahead. Her breath came harder as the elevation increased, the thin air forcing her lungs to work overtime. At 8,500 feet, the trail, such as it was, ended completely. What lay ahead was a rock face that would challenge experienced climbers without gear. With 60 pounds of equipment, it bordered on insane. Tors pulled out her climbing rope, secured one end to her harness, and began to climb. Hand over hand, feet finding purchase on tiny ledges, fingers wedging into cracks barely wide enough to grip. The rifle case on her back shifted with every movement, throwing off her balance, threatening to pull her backward into the void. Halfway up a particularly brutal section, her rope anchor gave way. For one heart-stopping second, Tors was falling backward into darkness, 60 feet of empty air below her, death reaching up with stone hands. Her right hand flailed, instinct overriding thought, fingers closing around a rock outcrop that shouldn't have been there. She slammed into the cliff face, the impact driving the air from her lungs. Her rifle case hit the rock with a sickening crack. For a moment she just hung there, one hand supporting her entire body weight plus gear, her feet scrabbling for purchase on smooth stone. Not like this, her mind screamed. Not falling off a goddamn mountain before the mission even starts. Her left hand found a crack. She wedged her fingers in, feeling the sharp stone bite into her flesh. Her right foot found a tiny ledge. Then her left. She pulled herself against the rock face, chest heaving, tasting copper in her mouth where she'd bitten her tongue. Blood ran from her hands where the rock had shredded skin. Her knees were scraped raw through her pants. The rifle case on her back had a new dent she could feel even without looking. She didn't care, she was alive. Tors secured a new anchor point, tested it 3 times and kept climbing. 2 hours later, at 9,200 feet, she hit a section that was genuinely impossible without technical climbing gear she didn't have. The rock face was smooth, offering nothing to grip, angled outward in an overhang that would defeat Spider-Man. She stared at it for 30 seconds, her headlamp revealing no options, no alternative route. Then she noticed the crack, barely 6 inches wide, running diagonally up the face like a scar. Too narrow to climb normally, but possibly wide enough for a technique she'd learned from a marine climber in Helmand, chimneying. Tors removed her pack and rifle case, securing them to a rope. She'd haul them up after. Then she wedged herself into the crack, back against one wall, feet against the opposite wall, suspended entirely by pressure and friction. She began to inch upward, muscles screaming, thighs burning with lactic acid. Every few feet she had to readjust, jamming herself tighter into the crack to avoid sliding back down. Sweat poured down her face despite the freezing temperature. Her whole body shook with effort. 30 feet, 40, 50. Her right leg cramped viciously, the muscle seizing into a knot of agony. Tors bit back a scream, refusing to give the mountain the satisfaction. She breathed through it, forcing the muscle to relax, willing her body to keep functioning. 60 feet, 70. The crack widened, and suddenly she could pull herself up and over the edge onto a narrow ledge. She lay there gasping, her entire body trembling, and hauled up her pack and rifle with the last reserves of her strength. She checked her watch. 3:40 hours. She'd been climbing for 4 hours and still had 500 vertical feet to go. Tors forced herself to stand to keep moving. Stopping meant cramping. Cramping meant falling. Falling meant failure. The final section was a nightmare of loose shale that slid away with every step, forcing her to climb 3 feet to gain 1 foot of elevation. Each step required total concentration. Test the rock, shift weight gradually, move before it gave way. One mistake would send her sliding hundreds of feet down a scree field that would shred her like a cheese grater. She climbed in a trance state, her mind separating from her body, watching herself move with detached precision. This was beyond training, beyond physical conditioning. This was pure will made manifest. At 5:47 hours, 13 minutes before dawn, Maya Tors pulled herself over the final ledge onto the summit ridge at 10,200 feet elevation. She collapsed onto the rock, unable to move, unable to care. Her hands were bloody ruins. Her knees were shredded. Her body was shutting down, demanding rest, demanding water, demanding anything except more punishment. She lay there for 2 full minutes, staring up at the stars beginning to fade with approaching dawn. Then she forced herself to sit up, to unpack her rifle case with shaking hands. The case had protected the weapon perfectly, not a scratch on it beyond the ones it had earned over 13 years of service. Tors assembled her shooting position with movements so practiced they required no thought, rifle on its bipod, scope lens caps removed, ammunition arranged within easy reach, her worn notebook secured against the wind. She glassed the valley below through her scope. There, 463 meters away according to her laser rangefinder, lay the village. She could see Hammond's position too, a tiny shadow among rocks 800 meters from the target buildings. Tors pulled out her anemometer and checked wind speed, 14 mph, gusting to 19. She made notes, calculating bullet drop and drift for the extreme range and elevation. At this altitude, the thinner air would affect her bullet's trajectory. She had to account for everything. Her radio crackled. Overwatch 2, this is Wildcat 6. We're in position. What's your status? Tors keyed the mic, her voice steady despite her exhaustion. Wildcat 6, Overwatch 2 is in position and operational. A pause, then Hammond's voice came back with what might have been grudging respect. Copy that. Didn't think you'd make it up there. Neither did I, Tors admitted quietly. She settled in behind her rifle, feeling the familiar weight, the perfect balance. Her hands had stopped shaking. Her breathing had steadied. The pain from the climb faded into background noise. Below, the valley was still dark. Somewhere down there, Khalid Nasir would soon appear, confident in his security, unaware that death was watching from an impossible position. Tors ran her hand along her rifle's scarred stock, feeling the history carved into its surface. We've got work to do, she whispered to the weapon that had never failed her. Dawn was coming. And with it, the moment that would prove whether that nightmare climb had been worth it. Dawn broke over the Afghan mountains like a slow-motion explosion, painting the peaks in shades of copper and gold. Tors had been in position for 3 hours, motionless except for the slight movements required to maintain circulation. At 10,200 feet, the morning cold cut through her gear like knives, but she barely noticed. Her entire world had narrowed to the view through her scope. The village below was waking up. She watched smoke rise from cooking fires, saw figures moving between buildings, women carrying water, children chasing chickens, old men sitting in doorways. Normal life in a place that was about to become a killing ground. Tors' radio earpiece crackled softly. All stations, this is Wildcat 6. We have good light now. Beginning systematic observation of target structures. Through her scope, Tors could see Hammond's position. He'd set up well, good concealment, solid firing platform, clear line of sight to the main village buildings. Textbook sniper craft. His spotter, Jenkins, would be beside him, scanning with high-powered optics, logging every person who entered or exited the buildings. But something bothered Tors. Something she'd noticed during her pre-dawn observation, while Hammond's team was still getting settled. The main target building, a 2-story structure with a green door that intelligence had identified as the meeting location, was too obvious, too exposed, too perfect. She'd glassed it for 20 minutes and noticed something that made her instincts scream. The windows were positioned wrong. You could see straight through the building from multiple angles. Any competent security team would recognize it as a sniper's dream. Men like Khalid Nasir, men who'd survived 2 years of targeted operations, didn't use obvious locations. Tors shifted her scope to the secondary structure she'd identified from the satellite imagery, partially concealed by a fold in the terrain, invisible from Hammond's angle, protected on 3 sides by natural walls. The windows were narrow, positioned to prevent observation. The door faced away from the main village approaches. It was exactly where she'd hold a sensitive meeting if she were paranoid about surveillance. She keyed her radio. Wildcat 6, Overwatch 2, requesting you put eyes on secondary structure, bearing 87 from your position, approximately 40 meters east of primary target building. Hammond's reply was curt. Negative, Overwatch 2, that structure isn't in our sector. Intelligence specified the Green Door building as primary location. We maintain focus on assigned target. Wildcat 6, I have significant concerns about. Overwatch 2, maintain radio discipline. We have our assignments. Wildcat 6 out. Torres felt frustration coil in her gut, but she said nothing more. Hammond was technically the mission commander for ground operations. Arguing over the radio was unprofessional and potentially compromising. So she did what snipers do, she watched, and she waited. At 8:47 hours, the sound of vehicle engines echoed through the valley. 3 Toyota Hilux trucks, the ubiquitous transportation of Afghan fighters, rolled into the village from the southern approach. Armed men dismounted. She counted 12, all carrying AK-47s with the casual competence of experienced fighters. Torres photographed each face with her scope-mounted camera, the images automatically uploading to the Tactical Operations Center via encrypted satellite link. Intelligence would run facial recognition, but she was already doing her own analysis. These men moved like professionals, weapons discipline, tactical spacing, one of them constantly scanning the high ground with binoculars. Then she saw him emerge from the second vehicle. Even through 1,463 meters of mountain air, even with 13 years of operational experience telling her to stay calm, Torres felt her heart rate spike. The face from the briefing photos, the scar from temple to jaw, the cold eyes that had looked at 47 American flag-draped coffins as acceptable losses in his war. Khalid Nasir. Her finger touched the trigger guard, not the trigger itself, not yet, but close. The range was extreme but makeable. Wind was 16 mph from the southwest, gusting. She'd need to hold 4.2 mils right, 8.7 mils up. The shot would take approximately 2 seconds to reach target. A lot could happen in 2 seconds. But she had positive ID. Rules of engagement were clear. Weapons free once confirmed. Torres' crosshairs settled on Nasir's chest as he stood beside the truck, talking with his security team. One squeeze, one bullet, mission complete. Then Nasir turned and started walking, not toward the Green Door building where Hammond was focused, but toward the secondary structure Torres had identified. Her blood ran cold. She keyed the radio immediately. Wildcat 6, I have positive ID on Nasir. He's moving to the secondary structure, the one I flagged earlier. He's not going to your building. Hammond's voice came back tight with tension. Negative, Overwatch 2. We have a figure entering the primary target building right now, matching Nasir's description and clothing. Torres swung her scope to the Green Door building. Sure enough, a man in similar dress, same color clothing, same build, even similar beard, was entering through the front door, flanked by guards. But it wasn't Nasir. The scar was wrong, the gait was different. This was a decoy and a good one. Wildcat 6, that is not the target. Repeat, not the target. Nasir is entering the eastern structure. I have clear visual. Overwatch 2, our intelligence package specifically identified. Your intelligence is wrong. Torres' voice carried an edge of desperation now. Hammond, trust me. I'm looking at Khalid Nasir right now, and he's not in your sector. There was a long pause. Too long. Through her scope, Torres watched Nasir disappear into the concealed building, his security team taking up positions around it. Positions that included 2 men with what looked like Russian PKM machine guns, serious firepower that suggested they were expecting trouble. Finally, Hammond's voice came back and Torres heard the doubt in it. Captain Williams, this is Wildcat 6. We have conflicting reports on target location, requesting guidance. The operations center was 200 miles away, relying on drone feeds that were delayed by 15-20 seconds and couldn't see into the buildings. Williams's voice crackled through. Wildcat 6, what's your assessment? Do you have positive ID on target? Another pause. Torres could imagine Hammond staring through his scope at the decoy, wanting it to be the real target, wanting his intelligence to be right, wanting to take the shot that would make his career. Wildcat 6, we have a figure matching target description in the primary building, preparing for engagement. No, Torres' shout broke radio protocol. Hammond, you shoot that decoy and every fighter in this valley will know we're here. Nasir will disappear and will have blown the entire operation. Overwatch 2, stand down. Hammond's voice was sharp. You're out of position and out of line. We have the shot. We have positive ID based on intelligence parameters. Engaging target in 30 seconds. Torres watched through her scope as Hammond's rifle barrel made tiny adjustments, settling on the green door building. She could see the slight shimmer of heat mirage rising from the barrel. He was ready to fire. And she could see Nasir, the real Nasir, sitting down inside the concealed building, visible for just a moment through a narrow window before security curtains were drawn. Her mind raced through options. She could take the shot herself, drop Nasir right now and prove Hammond wrong. But at 1,463 meters with gusty winds, if she missed, she'd compromise both positions. And if she hit, Hammond would never trust her judgment again, would always wonder if she'd grandstanded to make him look bad. Or she could let Hammond take his shot at the decoy, watch the operation fall apart, and live with the knowledge that 47 dead Americans wouldn't get justice because of intelligence failure and command stubbornness. Neither option was acceptable. Torres made a decision that would either save the mission or end her career. She keyed the radio to the command frequency, bypassing Hammond entirely. Overwatch base, this is Overwatch 2. I have definitive positive ID on Khalid Nasir in secondary structure, eastern sector. The target in the primary building is a decoy. I repeat, primary building contains a decoy. Request immediate authorization to engage actual target before he goes to ground. Silence on the radio, 5 seconds, 10 seconds, an eternity when lives hung in the balance. Then Captain Williams's voice, crisp with command authority. Wildcat 6, hold fire. I repeat, hold fire until we confirm target identity. Sir, we have, Hammond started. That's an order, Sergeant. Overwatch 2, describe your target in detail. Torres' eyes never left her scope as she spoke. Male, mid-40s, heavy beard with gray streaks, scar running from left temple to jaw, approximately 175 centimeters tall, wearing tan shalwar camis with dark vest. 4 bodyguards, 2 with PKM machine guns. Currently seated inside structure bearing 87 from Wildcat 6 position. Range 1,463 meters from my location. More silence. Then, Wildcat 6, can you confirm a scar on your target? Hammond's voice came back after a moment and Torres could hear the defeat in it. Negative, sir. No visible scar. Target's beard is darker than expected. The truth was settling in. The intelligence had been good about Nasir being in the village, but bad about where in the village. And Hammond had been so focused on following the intel brief that he'd missed the deception. Williams's voice cut through with brutal clarity. Wildcat 6, you are looking at a decoy. Overwatch 2 has positive ID on actual target. Hold your position and provide security. Overwatch 2, you are cleared hot. Take the shot when you have it. Copy Overwatch base, but be advised. Tor's voice was steady despite the adrenaline flooding her system. Target is now inside the structure. I've lost visual. He's gone to ground. And that's when Tor saw them through her scope. The vehicles that had brought Nasir beginning to turn around, engines starting, his security team beginning to collapse back toward the building. They were preparing to leave. If Nasir got into one of those vehicles, he'd be mobile, protected, and gone within minutes. The narrow mountain roads would make drone strikes impossible without massive civilian casualties. This was their only chance. But the target was inside a building, behind walls, invisible. Tor settled deeper into her shooting position, her ancient rifle suddenly feeling very small against an impossible problem. Overwatch 2 status, Williams demanded. Waiting for target to expose himself, sir, Torres replied, her voice calm despite knowing that might never happen. Nasir wasn't stupid. If he suspected surveillance, he'd stay inside until darkness, then slip away through routes they couldn't cover. 47 American families would never get justice. And that's when everything went catastrophically wrong. Torres saw Hammond's muzzle flash a split second before she heard his shot crack across the valley. He'd taken the shot anyway, at the decoy. The valley exploded into chaos. The sound of Hammond's rifle shot echoed across the valley like the crack of doom, and for one frozen heartbeat, the entire village seemed to hold its breath. Then all hell broke loose. Machine gun fire erupted from positions Torres had marked in her notebook an hour earlier, positions Hammond's team had missed. PKM rounds raked the rocks around Hammond's hide site, sending stone fragments flying like shrapnel. The distinctive crack of AK-47s joined the chorus, at least a dozen fighters opening up simultaneously. This wasn't a surprised response. This was a coordinated ambush. They'd been waiting. Contact, contact. We're taking heavy fire. Hammond's voice screamed through the radio, professional composure shattered. We've got machine guns in positions 3 and 7, RPGs moving up from the south. An explosion cut off his transmission as a rocket-propelled grenade detonated against the rocks above his position, showering his team with debris. Torres watched through her scope with the detached clarity that combat veterans know, that strange state where time seems to slow and every detail becomes crystalline. Hammond's team was caught in a perfect kill zone. The decoy they'd shot wasn't a decoy at all. It was bait in a trap that Nasir had set beautifully. He'd known they were coming. Maybe not exactly where, but he'd known enough to prepare. Through her scope, Torres saw Jenkins take a round through the shoulder, his body jerking backward, blood spray visible even at this distance. Martinez was trying to return fire, but was pinned by 2 separate machine gun positions. Singh was dragging Jenkins behind better cover, while Cooper laid down suppressing fire that was accomplishing exactly nothing against entrenched positions. And Hammond was on the radio screaming for air support that was 20 minutes away. Wildcat 6, this is Overwatch base. QRF is spinning up, but you're 23 minutes from any support. Can you break contact? Negative, we're completely pinned. They've got us in another explosion closer this time. Jesus Christ, they've got mortars. Torres swung her scope to the village center and saw exactly what Hammond was reporting. 2 men setting up a 60 mortar tube with practiced efficiency. If they started dropping rounds on Hammond's position, the team wouldn't last 5 minutes. Her crosshairs found the first mortar team member. Range, 1,347 meters. Wind, gusting 18 mph now. The man was moving, setting up the base plate, presenting a target maybe 18 inches wide. Torres controlled her breathing, let her training take over. The calculations were automatic now. Wind drift, elevation drop, target movement, Coriolis effect at this range. Her finger touched the trigger, feeling the familiar 3.2-pound break point. The rifle thundered. The recoil was honest, brutal, familiar as a handshake from an old friend. 1,400 meters downrange, the mortar man's head exploded in a pink mist. His partner froze, looking around wildly, unable to locate the threat. Torres worked her bolt, smooth, mechanical, perfect. Brass ejected in that familiar arc. Fresh round chambered, crosshairs settled. Second shot, The partner dropped, chest blown open. No more mortars. But Hammond's team was still dying. Overwatch 2, what's your status? Williams demanded. Torres was already moving her rifle, scanning for targets. Engaging enemy positions. Wildcat 6, I need you to mark your location with IR strobe. I can't see you clearly enough to avoid hitting friendly positions. Are you insane? Hammond shouted back. You're 1,400 meters away, you can't. Mark your position now or I let you die, Tor's voice cut like a blade. Your choice, Sergeant. A pause, then she saw it. The infrared strobe light invisible to the naked eye, but blazing like a beacon through her night vision-compatible scope. Hammond's position was now clearly defined. Everything else was fair game. Torres began to work. Third shot, machine gunner in the western position, the one doing the most damage to Hammond's team. At 1,289 meters, the man was firing in controlled bursts, professional and deadly. Tor's bullet took him in the upper chest. He fell backward off his position, the PKM going silent. Fourth shot, his assistant gunner trying to take over the weapon, down before he could chamber a round. The enemy fighters were panicking now, firing wildly at the mountains, unable to locate the sniper who was killing them from an impossible distance. Torres could see their confusion, their fear. They'd ambushed what they thought was a single sniper team. They hadn't planned for a second shooter at extreme range. Fifth shot, RPG gunner moving into position to finish Hammond's team. The man was crouched behind a wall, thinking he was safe. Tor's bullet went through the gap above the wall, caught him in the throat. The RPG round he'd been loading tumbled from dead hands. She's covering us, Martinez's voice, disbelief and hope mixed together. Whoever's shooting, they're dropping these bastards left and right. Torres was in the zone now, that almost meditative state where the rifle became an extension of her will. Identify target, calculate hold, breathe, squeeze, bolt, repeat. Each shot was a conversation between her and the weapon that had never betrayed her. Sixth shot, fighter trying to flank Hammond's position, down. Seventh shot, commander organizing a coordinated assault, down. Eighth shot, sniper in a window who'd almost had a bead on Singh, down. The volume of fire directed at Hammond's position was decreasing as Torres methodically eliminated threats. The enemy was breaking, pulling back, trying to find cover from an angel of death they couldn't see. But Tor's primary target, Nasir, was still invisible, still inside that fortified building. Then she saw movement at the building's rear door. Her scope swung over and her blood turned to ice. Nasir was running for a vehicle, surrounded by his remaining bodyguards, 8 men forming a human shield around him, moving fast toward an armored land cruiser that would make him untouchable once he got inside. Range, 1,463 meters. Wind, 19 mph, gusting to 24. Target moving at approximately 4 meters per second, surrounded by obstacles, heading for cover. This was it, the shot, the reason she'd climbed that nightmare mountain. Tor's scope tracked Nasir's movement, her mind calculating lead time, wind drift, the 2-second bullet flight. At this range, by the time her bullet arrived, Nasir would be 8 meters from where she aimed. She had to shoot at empty air and trust physics and experience. Ninth shot, lead bodyguard clearing the path. He dropped, causing the formation to hesitate. Nasir was 30 meters from the vehicle, 25. 10th shot, bodyguard on Nasir's right, down. 20 meters. The remaining guards were pushing Nasir faster, sacrificing themselves to get him to safety. 11th shot, bodyguard on the left. The human shield was collapsing. 15 meters. Torres chambered her 12th round, knowing this was it. If Nasir reached that vehicle, the ballistic glass and armored doors would make him invincible. 23 minutes until air support could possibly engage, and he'd be long gone by then. She put her crosshairs 4 meters ahead of Nasir, accounting for his movement and the bullet's flight time. Her finger touched the trigger. She exhaled half a breath and held it. But one of his bodyguards, the last one, the loyal one, stepped directly into her bullet's path. The shot that should have killed Khalid Nasir killed a man whose name she'd never know instead. 10 meters to the vehicle. Torres worked her bolt with desperate speed. No time for perfect calculations now. No time for anything except instinct honed by 10,000 trigger pulls. Nasir's hand touched the Land Cruiser's door handle. Torres fired. The bullet crossed 1,463 meters of mountain air in 1.8 seconds, dropping nearly 40 feet from barrel to target, drifting 6 feet right in the gusting wind. It caught Nasir in the upper back, just left of his spine, as he was pulling the door open. The impact drove him forward into the vehicle's interior, blood spraying across the Land Cruiser's tan leather seats. His body convulsed once, then went still, half in and half out of the vehicle, one arm hanging limp. Torres didn't celebrate. She was already scanning for new threats, her rifle tracking across the village. The remaining fighters were breaking completely now, abandoning positions, running for vehicles, fleeing into the mountains. The ambush had turned into a massacre, and they wanted no part of it. Wildcat 6, target down, Torres reported, her voice steady despite the adrenaline. Khalid Nasir is KIA. Remaining enemy forces are breaking contact. Hammond's response was broken by heavy breathing and the sound of return fire. Copy. Overwatch 2. We're extracting now. Jenkins is hit bad. We need immediate casevac. Understood. I'm covering your withdrawal. Move now while they're disorganized. Through her scope, Torres watched Hammond's team begin their fighting retreat, moving in bounds, one element covering while the other moved. Professional, disciplined, the training taking over now that the immediate threat had passed. She provided overwatch, her rifle following them, ready to engage any threat that emerged. But the village was emptying fast. Word had spread that there was a sniper in the mountains who could kill at impossible distances, and the surviving fighters wanted no part of that legend. 14th shot, fighter trying to set up an ambush along Hammond's withdrawal route. He never got the chance. 15th shot, sniper in a window drawing a bead on Martinez. The window exploded in red mist. Overwatch 2, we're clear of the immediate kill zone, Hammond reported, voice ragged with exhaustion and pain. Moving to exfil point Alpha. Copy. I'll remain in Overwatch until you're extracted. Torres stayed in position for another 40 minutes, watching through her scope as Hammond's team made their painful way to the extraction point, as the village below slowly went quiet, as the bodies of 15 enemy fighters lay scattered across the valley. Nasir's body was still half in the Land Cruiser, visible through her scope, a final confirmation that the mission, despite everything that had gone wrong, had succeeded. When the Black Hawks finally came thundering in to extract Hammond's team, Torres began her own withdrawal, packing her rifle with the same care she'd shown at the beginning. Her hands were steady, her breathing was calm. But inside, she was already replaying every shot, analyzing every decision, asking herself if there had been a better way. That's what separated great snipers from good ones. The ones who survived never stopped learning, never stopped questioning. The descent would be faster than the climb, but no less dangerous. Torres began working her way down the mountain, leaving behind the position that had saved 5 American lives and ended 15 enemy ones. The sun was high now, burning away the morning cold. And somewhere in an operations center 200 miles away, Captain Williams was already writing the after-action report that would change everything. Torres descended the mountain like a ghost, her movements precise despite 36 hours without sleep and the adrenaline crash that was trying to shut down her body. Every handhold was tested, every footfall deliberate. She'd survived the mission, Dying on the climb down would be a cosmic insult she refused to accept. 3 hours later, she reached the extraction point, a different location from where Hammond's team had been pulled out. The Black Hawk was waiting, rotors already turning, the crew chief's hand extended to pull her aboard. She collapsed into the webbed seat, finally allowing exhaustion to claim her. The crew chief offered water, which she drank in desperate gulps, her body suddenly remembering it needed hydration. Through the open door, she watched the mountains fall away, the village becoming a tiny cluster of buildings, the landscape returning to the vast emptiness that defined Afghanistan. Her rifle lay across her lap, still warm from the morning's work. 15 shots, 14 kills confirmed, one that had missed, the bodyguard who'd stepped into her line of fire. In the cold mathematics of sniping, that counted as a 93% success rate at extreme range under combat conditions. But mathematics didn't capture the truth of what had happened. The crew chief leaned close, shouting over the rotor noise. "Heard you saved Wildcat 6's entire team." They were saying someone was making impossible shots from God knows where. Tors didn't respond. She closed her eyes and let the helicopter's vibration lull her toward something resembling rest. When they landed at FOB Sentinel 4 hours later, the base had changed. Soldiers who'd mocked her rifle 3 days ago now stopped and stared as she walked past. Word had spread, the exact details garbled by the rumor mill, but the core truth intact. The woman with the ancient rifle had done something extraordinary. Tors ignored the attention, heading straight for the armory to clean her weapon. But Captain Williams intercepted her before she reached the door. "Staff Sergeant Tors, my office now." His tone was unreadable, neither angry nor pleased. Tors followed him across the compound, her rifle case in hand, wondering if she was about to be commended or court-martialed for bypassing Hammond's authority during the mission. Williams's office was a converted shipping container with a struggling air conditioner and walls covered in maps. Hammond sat in one of the chairs, his face a mask of conflicting emotions. Jenkins's blood still stained Hammond's uniform sleeve. "Sit," Williams commanded. Tors sat, setting her rifle case carefully against the wall. Williams studied both of them for a long moment before speaking. "I've spent the last 3 hours reviewing drone footage, radio intercepts, and after-action statements from every member of Wildcat 6. I've also been on the phone with Battalion Command, explaining how a mission that should have been a simple observation and elimination turned into a clusterfuck that nearly got 5 soldiers killed." Hammond shifted uncomfortably. "Sergeant Hammond, explain to me why you took a shot at a target you weren't 100% certain about." Hammond's jaw tightened. "Sir, the intelligence briefing specifically identified the Green Door building as the meeting location. The target matched Nasir's general description: height, build, clothing. I made a tactical decision based on available information." "You made a decision," Williams said coldly, "that directly contradicted explicit warnings from another operator who had better visibility of the situation. A decision that triggered an ambush that wounded one of your men and nearly compromised the entire mission." "Sir, with respect, Tors was out of position and—" "Out of position." Williams's voice could have cut steel. "Staff Sergeant Tors was in exactly the position she requested, a position you dismissed as irrelevant. A position that gave her clear line of sight to the actual target while you were staring at a decoy. Her out-of-position location is the only reason any of you are alive right now." The silence in the office was absolute. Williams turned to Tors. "Staff Sergeant, walk me through your engagement sequence. I want to understand exactly what happened after Sergeant Hammond's shot compromised the operation." Tors' voice was flat, professional, stripped of emotion. "After Wildcat 6 engaged the decoy target, enemy forces initiated a pre-planned ambush from at least 6 prepared positions. I identified Mortar Team as the most immediate threat to friendly forces and engaged at 1,347 meters. 2 shots, 2 kills. Mortar threat neutralized. She continued, her tone never changing. Shifted to machine gun position western sector, 1,289 meters. Killed primary gunner and assistant. Engaged RPG team preparing to fire on friendly position, 156 meters, 1 shot. Killed flanking element attempting to envelope Wildcat 6, multiple targets, ranges between 900 and 1,400 meters. Hammond was staring at her now, really seeing her for the first time. During this engagement, I observed primary target, Khalid Nasir, attempting to escape via armored vehicle with bodyguard escort. Engaged bodyguards while target was moving, dropped 3 at ranges exceeding 1,400 meters. Final shot on Nasir himself at 1,463 meters while target was in motion. Confirmed kill. Williams leaned back in his chair. 14 confirmed kills, at ranges between 900 and 1,463 meters, while under time pressure, while providing overwatch for a pinned unit, with a rifle that my armorer tells me was manufactured in 2009 and should have been retired years ago. He pulled out a piece of paper, the ballistics report from her rifle. The armorer checked your weapon when you brought it in. Do you know what he found? Tors remained silent. The barrel has over 15,000 rounds through it, triple the normal service life. The stock has been repaired with epoxy and parachute cord. Half the finish is worn off. By every technical standard, this rifle should be in a dumpster, not in a combat zone. Williams looked at her directly. So explain to me how you just pulled off what might be the most effective single-operator engagement I've seen in 20 years of service. Tors met his gaze steadily. Because that rifle and I know each other, sir. Every quirk, every tendency, every microscopic variation in its performance. Modern rifles are more accurate on paper, more consistent in laboratory conditions. But in the field, when everything's going to hell and you need to make a shot that matters, I'll take experience over technology every single time. She gestured toward her rifle case. That weapon has been with me through 5 deployments. I've fired it in 120-degree heat and -20 cold, in sandstorms and rainstorms, at sea level and at 12,000 feet elevation. I know exactly how it performs under every condition because I've been in every condition with it. Tor's voice carried a quiet intensity now. When I put my eye to that scope this morning, I wasn't guessing about wind drift or bullet drop. I wasn't consulting a ballistics computer or hoping my equipment would compensate for my mistakes. I knew where that bullet would go because I've sent thousands just like it to targets just like that. The rifle doesn't lie to me, and I don't lie to it. That's why we're both still here. Hammond spoke up, his voice rough. Staff Sergeant, I owe you an apology, several apologies. He looked down at his hands. I let my ego override my judgment. I dismissed your assessment because I wanted to be right, and Jenkins almost died because of it. Tors turned to him. Jenkins almost died because Nasir is smarter than our intelligence gave him credit for. He planned for us. The decoy, the ambush positions, that was professional work. But you saw through it, Hammond said. You tried to warn me and I didn't listen. You trusted your briefing, which is what you were trained to do, but I've learned that enemy commanders don't read our briefings. Tor's expression softened slightly. We all made it out. That's what matters. Williams pulled out another document. I'm recommending both of you for commendations. Hammond, despite your tactical error, you kept your team alive under extreme fire and conducted a successful fighting withdrawal while wounded. That takes leadership. He looked at Tors. And you, Staff Sergeant, just became a case study in why we don't retire experienced operators just because their equipment looks old. Battalion wants you to brief other sniper teams on long-range engagement techniques. They're also asking why we're not making better use of seasoned operators instead of always chasing the newest technology. Tors almost smiled. "Permission to decline the briefing assignment, sir. I'm a shooter, not a teacher." "Denied. You'll do the briefings. Because if sharing what you know saves even one soldier's life, you'll do it and you'll do it well. Clear?" "Yes, sir." William stood, signaling the meeting was over. "Get some rest, both of you. Debrief with intelligence is tomorrow at 900. Dismissed." Outside the office, Hammond and Tors walked in silence for a moment before Hammond stopped. "That rifle," he said quietly. Would you tell me its story, the real story, not just the numbers?" Tors studied him, seeing genuine curiosity now instead of mockery. She nodded toward the team room. "Buy me coffee and I'll tell you about Fallujah, about the spotter who carried it before me, about why some things are worth keeping, even when everyone says you should let them go." As they walked, other soldiers watched, some with respect, some with curiosity, some with the dawning understanding that they'd witnessed something rare. The sun was setting over Fob Sentinel, painting the mountains in shades of purple and gold. And in the team room, over bad coffee that tasted like diesel fuel, Maya Tors began to tell the story of a rifle that refused to become obsolete, and the shooters who'd proven that some weapons don't age. They become legendary. The team room was quieter than Tors had ever heard it. Hammond sat across from her, his coffee untouched, waiting. But they weren't alone anymore. Word had spread through the fob like wildfire, and now a dozen soldiers had gathered, some sitting, others standing along the walls, all watching the woman with the scarred rifle that had just rewritten the rules. Tors cradled her coffee, feeling the weight of their attention. She wasn't used to this. Snipers lived in the shadows, did their work unseen, left no trace except the silence where an enemy used to be. This visibility felt wrong, exposed. But she understood why Williams had ordered the briefings. These young soldiers needed to learn what she'd learned the hard way, that survival in war wasn't about having the best gear. It was about knowing your gear better than you knew yourself. "You want the rifle's story," Tors said finally, her voice quiet but carrying in the silent room. "Fine, but understand this isn't a story about a weapon. It's a story about trust." She set down her coffee and pulled the rifle case onto the table, unzipping it with the reverence of someone handling something sacred. The weapon lay in its foam cradle, every scratch and scar visible under the fluorescent lights. November 2011, Fallujah, Iraq. I was a corporal fresh off sniper school, thought I knew everything. A bitter smile crossed her face. My spotter was a staff sergeant named Marcus Chen. 10 years in, 3 deployments, the best shooter I'd ever seen. This was his rifle. Tors lifted the weapon, her hands finding their familiar positions automatically. We were on overwatch in the industrial district, covering a patrol moving through what intelligence said was a clear sector. Intelligence was wrong. The patrol walked into an ambush, 30 insurgents with RPGs, machine guns, the works. The room was absolutely still. Chen started engaging targets. I was calling wind, spotting impacts, logging shots. He was making kills at 900, 1,000 meters, shots I didn't think were possible. He dropped 11 fighters in 4 minutes, gave the patrol enough breathing room to get to cover and call for support. Tors' voice went flat, emotionless, the tone of someone reciting facts to keep feelings at bay. Then an IED went off under our building. We didn't know the insurgents had rigged the whole block. The explosion collapsed the floor beneath us. Chen fell through into the room below, broke both legs, shattered his left arm. The building was on fire, smoke everywhere, and I could hear him screaming. Hammond leaned forward, transfixed. I went down after him, found him pinned under a concrete beam, flames spreading fast. He knew he wasn't getting out. I knew it too, but I was trying anyway, trying to lift the beam, burning my hands on hot metal. Tors' fingers unconsciously touched the scars on her palms. He stopped me, grabbed my arm with his good hand and pulled me close. Her voice cracked slightly. He said, "Take the rifle, don't let it burn. It's got 189 confirmed kills, and it deserves better than dying in this shithole. You take it, you learn it, you make it count." Then he pushed me away, told me to run before the whole building came down. The silence was suffocating. I grabbed his rifle and his notebook, all his dope cards, all his win charts, 13 years of knowledge. I ran. The building collapsed 20 seconds later. Chen died in the fire because I wasn't strong enough to save him, and because he cared more about this piece of metal and wood than his own life. Tor's eyes were dry, but her voice carried the weight of a promise made in fire and blood. So I kept it, studied his notes like scripture, fired 10,000 rounds learning its quirks, had it rebuilt when the barrel wore out, but kept the original action, the heart of what Chen had known. Every shot I take, I'm honoring the man who taught me that gear doesn't make the shooter. Knowledge does, experience does, trust does. She looked around the room at the young faces watching her. "You all saw what happened this morning. You're wondering how I made those shots, want to know the secret." Nods all around. "There is no secret, it's just time. Time on the rifle, time in conditions, time learning what works and what fails. Chen spent 13 years with this weapon. I've spent another 13. That's 26 years of combined experience, all coded into muscle memory and scar tissue." Tors ran her hand along the worn stock. "This rifle knows the wind like an old sailor knows the sea. It knows cold bore shots and hot barrel shots. It knows how to kill at a mile because we've done it before, and we'll do it again." She looked directly at Hammond. "Your M110 is a better rifle on paper, more accurate, more consistent, more forgiving. But when everything goes wrong, when the batteries die, when the electronics glitch, when you're beyond the range your computer says is possible, this rifle will still send a bullet exactly where I tell it to, because we've had 26 years to learn how to talk to each other." Jenkins spoke up from the back, his arm in a sling from the shoulder wound. "How many confirmed kills now, Staff Sergeant?" 251, Tors said quietly. "Chen's 189, plus my 62 before today. Add 14 from this morning makes it 265 total. But I don't think about numbers. I think about the soldiers who came home because an enemy didn't. I think about the missions that succeeded because someone was watching from a mile away. I think about Chen burning to death rather than let his knowledge die with him." She carefully returned the rifle to its case. "So yeah, laugh at the old gear if you want. Call it a museum piece. Call it obsolete. But understand this, obsolete means no longer useful. And as long as I'm alive, as long as I can hold this rifle and put my eye to this scope, it will never be obsolete. It will just be experienced." Martinez raised his hand tentatively. "Staff Sergeant, what would you tell someone who wanted to be as good as you?" Tors considered the question. "Stop chasing the latest gear. Find one weapon system and master it completely. Shoot in every condition you can find: wind, rain, heat, cold. Keep a notebook. Write everything down. Learn your ballistics not from a computer but from watching impacts and adjusting. And most important, find a mentor who knows more than you and listen when they teach." She stood, shouldering her rifle case. "But mostly, put in the time. There's no shortcut to 10,000 hours. No app that replaces experience. No technology that substitutes for knowing your weapon so well that you can feel when something's off before you even look." Hammond stood too, extending his hand. "Thank you, Staff Sergeant, for the lesson, for saving our lives, for showing us what real mastery looks like." Tors shook his hand, seeing genuine respect there now instead of condescension. "Thank you for listening. Chen would have liked that. He always said the hardest thing to teach was humility, because you can't learn it from a manual. You have to earn it by failing, surviving, and being honest about both." As the soldiers dispersed, talking among themselves, Tors walked outside into the Afghan night. Stars blazed overhead in the pollution-free darkness, the same stars Chen had seen from a rooftop in Fallujah before the fire took him. She sat on a HESCO barrier, her rifle case beside her, and pulled out Chen's original notebook. The pages yellowed and worn, his handwriting still clear after 13 years. She'd memorized every page, but she still read them sometimes, hearing his voice in the margins, remembering the lessons he'd taught. Captain Williams found her there 20 minutes later. He sat without asking, looking up at the stars. "You know," he said finally, "Battalion wants to write this up, turn it into a training scenario for sniper schools. The Battle of Kaust Valley or some such. Make it official doctrine." "They can write whatever they want," Torres said. "Won't change what happened." "They also want to know if you'd consider training the next generation of long-range shooters. Instructor position at Benying, stateside assignment, the works." Torres was quiet for a long moment. "I'm not done here yet, sir." "I figured you'd say that." Williams smiled slightly. "How many deployments is this for you?" "6, counting this one." "Most people tap out at 3. Most people aren't carrying a promise to a dead man." Torres looked at her rifle case. "Chen died so this could keep fighting. I owe him at least 1 more rotation. Maybe 2, we'll see." Williams nodded, understanding in a way only combat veterans could. "The offer stands. When you're ready, if you're ever ready, we need people like you teaching the young bucks that technology isn't a substitute for skill." He stood to leave, then paused. "For what it's worth, Staff Sergeant, what you did today was extraordinary. Not just the shooting, though that was remarkable, but you stayed professional when Hammond dismissed you. You didn't grandstand or say, 'I told you so,' when you were proven right. You just did the job and saved lives. That's the mark of a true professional." "It's the mark of someone who's made enough mistakes to know better," Torres corrected. "I've been Hammond. Young, confident, certain my way was right. I survived long enough to learn differently. He will too." After Williams left, Torres sat alone with her rifle and the stars and the memories of everyone who hadn't made it home. Somewhere out in those mountains, Khalid Nasser's body was being prepared for burial. 47 American families would get some measure of closure, knowing the man who'd killed their loved ones wouldn't kill anyone else. It didn't bring anyone back. It never did. But it balanced the scales just a little. Torres opened her notebook, not Chen's but her own, now filled with 13 years of accumulated knowledge. She added today's data: wind conditions, temperature, elevation, every shot's specific parameters. Someday, if she didn't make it back, maybe someone would pull this notebook from her hands the way she'd pulled Chen's. Maybe the knowledge would live on, rifle to rifle, shooter to shooter, generation to generation. That's how legends were really born, not in the moment of extraordinary action, but in the quiet transfer of hard-won wisdom from those who'd survived to those who still had to learn. Torres closed the notebook, stood, and walked toward her quarters. Tomorrow there would be more missions, more targets, more impossible shots to make. But tonight she'd sleep knowing that somewhere, Chen was smiling. His rifle had just added 14 more kills to its legacy. And the story, the real story of trust and sacrifice, and the bond between a shooter and their weapon, would continue as long as someone was willing to carry it forward. The laughter was gone. In its place, respect, understanding, and the knowledge that some things only get better with age. Some weapons don't retire. They become eternal. The end.